Hear now the word of the Lord as it is written in the Old and New Testament and the teachings of the new church given for the second coming. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thoughts from afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down. You are acquainted with all of my ways. You know it altogether, O Lord. There is not a word on my tongue, but behold, you know it. If I ascend into heaven, behold, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I should take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. The Lord is gracious and full of compassion, slow to anger and great in mercy. The Lord is good to all, and his tender mercies are over all his works. The Lord is just in all his ways, gracious in all of his words. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And behold, I am coming quickly, and my reward is with me, to give to everyone according as his work shall be. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Blessed are those who do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter through the gates into the city. In order that a person may live to eternity, it's necessary that the mortal or the material body should be taken away by death from them. And when this is done, that which is immortal is uncovered, and the person becomes the spirit, enabled to inhabit the spiritual world, but still in a human form. That after death everyone lives to eternity is very clear from what is shown in the Word, where heaven is called life everlasting. And the Lord said to his disciples, because I live, you shall live also. And concerning the resurrection, Jesus said, God is the God of the living, not of the dead, for all live to him, for they cannot die anymore. And he that overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. These words signify those who are steadfast in the divine truth in heaven. The words overcoming meaning to be steadfast through temptation and to be in genuine affections of truth. To do good, which is really good, means to love that which is good for the sake of what is good. They that love this way are not willing to hear about merit. They love to do what is right and perceive satisfaction from so doing. On the other hand, they're sorrowful if others believe that they have done these things for the sake of themselves. This is almost like those who do good to their friends for the sake of friendship, or a brother for the sake of brotherhood, or the wife and children for the sake of the wife or the children, or for the country for the sake of the country. Friendship and love for country are good loves. They who do good to those around them for the sake of heavenly uses and heavenly reasons. They do not do so simply for the sake of themselves. In Isaiah, we hear these words, "May you be called one who repairs the breach, one who restores the path to dwell in." These words refer to the church and charity, and those who are loving and living in essential things. Repairing the breach stands for correcting falsities which have crept in through the separation of good and truth, and restoring paths in which one may dwell is linked to walking upon the good life or the paths of truth. Heaven and the church together are like a single house. The church is like the foundation or substructure, and heaven is like the superstructure or the roof. And the inhabitants in that house communicate one to another. When therefore the church, as a result of evils and falsities, slips from underneath, the house does not hold together, except for its walls perhaps, but the inside communication with angels is cut off, and the stairs by which one goes up and down are, as it were, removed. So it is, this house must totally collapse unless the Lord comes into the world and instaurates or sets up a new, repairs a new church. And through these repairs to the house, the Lord props up heaven. This would appear more clearly to our sight if we prayed to the Lord and sought to work with Him. Amen. Thou wilt show me the path of life. In thy presence is fullness of joy, and at thy right hand there are pleasures forevermore. For a day in your courts is better than 1,000. I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of wickedness. Jesus said, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hear my voice and open the door, I will come in to him, and I will sup with him, and he with me. And he that overcometh, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God." Let those that be of you build up the waste places of old, raise up the foundations of the generation upon generation. May you be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the paths to dwell on. Richard Parker, a journeyman. Journeyman is somebody who works. An angelic repairman, a pillar in the temple of his God. He who salvaged broken parts and helped others. He who maintained what he could maintain within himself and within others, that which is of the temple of God. Spiritually, psychologically, physically. We know a lot about heaven. We're blessed to be given teachings of the church, volumes upon divine volumes, telling us about the life that we are to live after this one. We're invited to enter in through celestial passageways and passages from the Word to dwell in the light and the warmth of this shared love spoken of by our God. We grow to become branches intertwined in the community. We become grafted, adopted by God onto or into the tree of life itself. It is the divine that makes heaven, and the angels constitute it. He is divine, and we are the branches. Today we gather to remember the life of one who loved those heavenly volumes. And even more, he loved applying their teachings to life, bringing them into himself, into his family, into his marriage, into his parenting and grandparenting, bringing all that he could of the Lord into his everyday existence. Offering his services to the church, to his employers, to his country, and to his king. We're taught that knowing good is good. But it's empty without applying what we know to be good in life. Reflection, gabbing, jaw-wagging are refreshing and delightful things, and Richard enjoyed sitting around having a beer and talking things up. But it's better to get the job done. And he was all about getting the job done too. Heavenly life is what you make it. It is what we make of our earthly life with an eye towards heavenly things. The last three things Richard said to me at his bedtime, at his bedside, it was his bedtime too. They were whispered in weakened words. He said, read, pray, thank you. As pastor, I got to read to him from the Word. I prayed with him. And I sat in that sphere of gratitude that was created all around him, from him and from his family and friends, all of them who enjoyed the life of this good man. His family and friends had the opportunity to come to his bedside in those last few weeks. They read, they prayed, they thanked. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. Richard loved to read the Word. He loved to study it on his own, with Jillian, with the family, in doctrinal classes. He made the Word his guidepost for his path of life. He took from the Lord his direction, and he returned to the Lord his commitment and followed his commandments. The children, you children, learned that your allowance was distributed, but on the way out of getting the allowance, you went by the envelopes for contributions to the church. The church contributions got the first cut. Was that Richard? Yes, that was Richard. That is a heritage of a man that he gives to his family, to his community, to all people who came to know him and love him. You knew where his priorities were. Richard Parker was a hands-on kind of man, too. Downstairs, you can see evidence of his handiwork. As a draftsman, he worked on plans and drawings. I know you can't see it very well, but I have a little photograph of a map that he took part in drawing. And I love there's a red circle down here is the Olivet Church. You can maybe make out the red line. And by golly, within that red line, here's Richard and Jillian's house. Nancy and John. John and Ursa. And there's a bunch of other people I could pick you out, but we haven't got time for all that now. I bring that and put it up because it's an external thing. But as we know from our lives in the new church, when we read the Word, we know there's an internal sense, a spiritual sense. And all of life actually has a spiritual sense. As you get to know someone better, or you see their handiwork, you know there's something more or deeper or spiritual to that. Richard worked in drawing and planning. He worked in drafting, studied civil engineering. He worked at the Hamilton Steel Company and many years at AECL. What's that stand for again? Atomic Energy something, Canada Unlimited or Unlimited. But some of the happiest years of his life were when he was right here in this building. All through his life, this building and the building before it, where he grew up and went to school down in Elm Grove, Parkdale area. But in this building, in those towards later years, but he was a young man. He was property manager, janitor, repairman, all-around fix-it guy. You could go to Richard with any question about 279 Burnham Thorpe. This also along with his private repair enterprise. Many an older person, many widows, knew they didn't have to worry because they knew if a problem arose with one phone call, there'd be a man. Who'd come to their house or their condo, and it would be fixed. The children, grandchildren, Aunt Jillian, of course, all of you, on some level, have fond memories. But the children talked about memories of going to bed, hearing the sound of projects being worked on, either projects around their own house or stuff that Richard brought in from some friend or relative or from the church. Richard was the baby in the family. John, his older brother, Sylvia. I hope you're watching down in Bernathen with your friends there. Richard had a twinkle in his eye as I began to know him, marrying into the family. Disclosure, I'm a Parker too. He had a twinkle in his eye, sometimes talking about his escapades from his youth. Jillian met him as a fellow member of the young people's group, which centered their life around the social life of the church. She may have been warned about him being one of those bad boys, but that was little deterrent in him establishing a place in her heart. And her establishing a place in his. They married in 1962, and look at all the trouble they caused. Sheila and Janet, Keith and Philip, Eric. What a blessing your father's life have been to you and to all of us, to you and to your children. You each shared so many wonderful stories with me as we were getting ready for this service about your father, and each of you had the opportunity. What a blessing to be able to communicate with him before he passed, to come to visit him, to have a phone call with him, to write to him. One of the impacts of Richard and Jillian's life on you children, is the processing that you have gone through, and the process the whole community goes through with the passing of somebody that we love. Difficult in so many ways, of course, but it bonds us, doesn't it, to remember the common love we have for someone, the common good of that person that we all share and acknowledge, having been a blessing in our lives. You've bonded, we've bonded in new ways, and we draw strength from the example of Richard Parker, what he exemplified. We're told in the Word that we have two memories, an external memory and a very internal memory. So we have precious memories that we shared, things from the surface, things from the earth, trips, Hilton's Head, travels across the continent or just downtown, evening star-filled skies, out on the lake, cottage life, canoe trips, expensive canoe trips that led to certain parts of cottage life, pets and projects, Tilly hats, and Brussels sprouts, which you know are not good for you if you have Parkinson's. And serious interludes of discipline. You will not talk to your mother that way. Funny moments. Funny moments when you find things that had been repaired months before, but you hadn't noticed, and then there they are, fixed. A green sweater tucked away in a filing cabinet. $20 bill where you least expected it. This mysterious reappearing $20 bill. And then always more car repairs and toy repairs. And coming up a little ashamed with your dumpster dive find, and Richard's going to fix it for you. There's an internal sense to these external moments. An internal sense about a man's spirit and how it expresses himself in these external things. The way the Lord's Spirit expresses itself in the Word. There's an internal memory, too, an internal sense of a man's spirit which can never fade and never disappear. It is that which we touch upon when we are very close through these stories, through the photos, the other memorabilia. The internal sense is where the Lord touches us most deeply. If we accept Him in, He gives us these incredible gifts. And I don't mean the ability to fall asleep anywhere, which you said was a gift from your Father. Other gifts. Although we may learn to rest in the Lord and have a confidence and a security because we've been growing up and living with a man who trusted in the Lord. Kind of gifts that we glimpse about Richard: his honesty, his integrity, steadfast and even intense insistence to maintain certain principles and follow a certain path. The kind of internal in a person that wants to come to the Arcana class even though he could barely participate. But he could be there with Jillian and he could partake of the class. He could read, he could pray, he could be thankful. Read, pray, say thank you. We're told that good people have a very intense insistence at certain times. In the True Christian Religion, number 9, it talks about everybody all over the world has this intensity to lead them to believe that there is one God. All people will insist, if they are following that intensity, to insist there is one God. All Mohammedans in their empire, it says Africans in their kingdoms, the Asians and several of theirs, not to mention present-day people. The most ancient people, the ancient people. There's something that gives us an ability to be in touch with things that make us want to insist on what we believe. Sometimes that can be a problem for other people when you're insistent, and sometimes it's a lifesaver, and it's what you count on, and it's what you need. Richard was one to keep insistence about certain things because you knew who he was and what he believed in, what he loved, and what he was willing to suffer for. So running beneath these externals of this internal man, these externals are cast aside and the internal man comes alive. Richard will be finding his pleasures in the interior uses he performed here on earth. And there's plenty of work to do. Angelic repairmen are needed in so many arenas of spiritual and celestial societies. And I know that's not all Richard was. But when you come right down to it, doing the repair of things in the church, doing the repair of things of the heart, is the work we do for each other. When it talks about the Lord establishing a new church, the word that's used is to repair or build again that which was broken. Anybody who has a keen natural and spiritual eye to help repair, they're precious in the eyes of God, and they're very needed in heaven. Richard won't be bored, not that he was ever bored on earth, but he won't be bored. He'll have plenty to do with that interior love showing forth. And precious it is to hear these stories about Richard, husband and father. He stood behind his wife and his children to give them support through their difficult times. And like all of us, don't the Parkers have difficult times? He came to help his siblings, his nieces and his nephews, his extended family, his adopted friends and family. May he be called the repairer of the breach, Isaiah says, the restorer of the paths that we live in. Wow, I was happy when I found that passage. Like, oh, Richard, you've been there all along. This talks about you, a repairer of the breach, when things are needing to be mended. There's lots of people who can do it for you. Externally, Richard was great. Internally, he also was great. He knew where your lives were. He knew what you were about. He wasn't pushy, but he insisted on being present and being someone who you could count on. Each of you know when he stood by you, and you've shared some of those stories with me. When he came to help you, to console you in his Richard, dad, unk, friend kind of way. That kind of heavenly handyman is hard to find. So you grandchildren, you know the deep love he also had for you. Inquiring about your lives, keeping in touch with you, taking special time with your projects and your interests so you could share with him the things that gave you pleasure and delight. You knew that he considered you. He had paid attention to your life. Not just his version of what your life should be, but your life. He was a good man. You know, many of us, and I'm speaking to you grandchildren, many of us didn't get to know our grandfathers this way. You know how cherished and blessed you are to have had this man in your life and the influence he had upon you. What's Richard doing now, we wonder? Greeting his parents, his cousins, aunts and uncles, old friends, regrouping with the youth group from the 50s, going on progressive dinner parties through heavenly societies in a restored convertible. Gonna be sweet. Finally, one nephew in a goodbye thank you letter remembered Richard welcoming him to Canada by taking him on a bike ride all through Toronto. A ride full of reminiscences and even revealing some iffy stories about his youth. The nephew ended his letter with these words, "So, my friend, you have a good journey. And one day when I'm newly arrived in your town again, maybe we can go for another bike ride where you can show me around again." So we'll end with these words that Richard often spoke to us. Keep well and cheerful, friend. Drive with care. Goodbye, Richard. Godspeed. Amen.